and me. I don't know. I think I did okay, but I think there's going to be some people that are pissed at me. So I want to hear the good and the bad. I want to hear the good, bad, and the ugly. What's going on, people?
That sucked.
Excellent.
The whole conversation, I was, what's going on? I wanted to see fire in people's bellies. I didn't want to see any kind of diplomacy. I didn't want to see any bridges.
Dragons.
I didn't want to see any bridges being made. Come on, what is that? In all sincerity, I thought it was an excellent, excellent show. You're my hero, Maute.
Well, no, seriously. I mean, I gave him a platform to say what he had to say because I really thought that he was chased by Alex. Does that make me a dick?
I'm afraid to comment. You
don't have to. Who else has to say something?
It's not that I'm afraid. I mean, there's certain things that I disagree with both sides. I mean, there's things that I disagreed even this evening. There's obviously I'm biased in a certain sense. I mean, I obviously I'm a fan of Alex and fundamentally flawed. I think
so
they're both, and I wanted to hear this from both sides, that they were both guilty of goading each other nonstop before and after the show. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to self-admit and say we were taking the piss out of each other at least a little bit before each show. And I think that's something that, I mean, the fans on each side are rooting for them when they do it, but they're not seeing that, it's obviously causing a conflict between each other. So how do you put two people in the same room that you've been going at it online for a whole while and be like, let's have a rational debate? I don't. There's gonna be baggage in that conversation, which I think is great that you came in because you're impartial in a sense, or you have a method of having these kind of discussions, and I think it worked really well. You guys could have had a debate in yourself, a debate all by yourself about specific things, and it would have worked really well. I think, yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm super curious to hear FSX.
Oh, hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I don't know. I think we're false equivocating a little bit with the conversation between Alex and Tim. Tim was blatantly dishonest, and when he was coming into this hangout with you today, he was pretty much avoiding every single thing he had done during that hangout and acted as though Alex was bullying him, where I saw it as completely the opposite. Alex was trying to talk. Tim would cut the mic. He would hear echo. He would start playing video. There was a point where he played a video for 5 minutes, walked away from the camera. And then he told Alex he wasn't acting like a gentleman. So I don't think it was quite fair to act as though it was half and half.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I have to agree with FSX's characterization there, but I'll disagree a little bit too. I mean, I think what went on is we know some of what went on. I mean, BibleThumpingWingnut has made statements and videos and comments where he said that his position, his presuppositional argument, is unassailable. It is indefeasible, and that he's super confident in it, and that everyone who's ever confronted it has lost. That's quite a boast. Now, and that he never runs from a fight. And this seems to have sort of inspired Alex to say, "Oh, you never run from a fight? Well, I'm going to bring the fight to you." And he sort of issued a challenge, something between a challenge and an invitation. And then when BibleThumpingWingnut was not forthcoming and agreeing to it, then Alex pursued him. Now, here I disagree with Alex quite profoundly, actually. And I should say that I consider Alex a friend. I respect and admire him tremendously. He has a kind of a fearlessness and courage in the heat of verbal combat that impresses me, that I don't have. But my goodness, he really went after him, and I think he went too far in taunting him and goading him until finally Tim felt he had to, in order to save face, capitulate. Now, I think that when people make boasts like that, you kind of have this coming, and you just have to suck it up. But then if you decide that you're going to go along with it, then you better go and do the debate. But no one's under any obligation to to do a debate. I mean, I have someone, without naming names, there's someone right now who is on a YouTube channel calling me names and challenging me to debates all the time. You know, if someone invites you to a party, you don't have to go. And that's how I see debates. If you can invite me to a debate, or you can challenge me to a debate. The polite thing to do is invite me to the debate. But if you challenge me to the debate or invite me to the debate, it's my prerogative to say yes or no. And you have nothing to say about it, and I have no reason to give you other than I just don't feel like it. That should suffice. So that should have been sufficient for Alex. But nevertheless, Tim did agree, and we're all responsible for the actions that we initiate. And so he initiated the debate by agreeing to it at that point. Wasn't his idea, but it was on because he agreed to. And then he didn't debate. You know, I don't actually accept his characterization of what his strategy was. His strategy was to try to discredit Alex. It wasn't to present his view and argue against Alex's view. It was to try to discredit him, and he was using sound bites, and that is dishonest. And the reason I think it's so dishonest is, well, first of all, it's a big. The first thing is it assumes that a person is not allowed to change their mind, and that the only reason a person would change their mind in the course of several arguments on a position is that they're casting about desperately for any old reason. Any old argument will do. Now, of course, some people do that, but I don't think Alex was doing that, because he's changed his mind repeatedly, back and forth on a few things. He got stumped the first time he got hit with this argument. He didn't know where it was coming from. He did some homework, and at the end of the day, if you don't find an argument convincing, the fact that you now change your battle plan, so to speak, doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility, because you're unconvinced by an argument, to accept the argument, even if you don't have an honest rebuttal. If you just don't find the position convincing, you can just say, okay, well, I'm going to look for another argument, because I'm still not convinced that it's right. Something tells me that it's still wrong. That's not wrong. And what I think Tim was trying to do was completely discredit him. And the other thing that's really wrong here is that Alex brought arguments that were absolutely decisive. They went unaddressed. So whatever you think of Alex's arguments, and I agreed with some and I disagreed with many, they went unaddressed. They really went unchallenged. And so this amounts to a big fat ad hominem. And that's what I didn't like about it.
One thing I'd say, I think
debating at all.
I think what Tim was trying to do, and I think Alex called it, was he was trying to get Alex to leave the Hangout so that Tim could go ahead and preach about Alex after he left. And that's exactly what Tim did after he left. He talked for 20 more minutes. That was his plan the whole time. And if you listen to it, Tim was intentionally not answering any question Alex presented.
Yeah.
No matter how simple it was. I watched the whole debate.
He admitted that tonight. He admitted that tonight, that his followers are atheists. He knows his audience, and what he planned to do was to expose the so-called fallacious arguments that Alex is bringing up. That was his goal. He made it very plain tonight, and I'm actually happy that he did that.
Yeah, he was super honest about it. And let's face the facts. I mean, he wasn't trying to debate. He wasn't trying to answer Alex's questions.
I'm just saying it kind of explains why Alex acted the way he did. Alex had prepared, and now he had all these arguments he was so excited to present. Tim wasn't having them, so...
Yeah, but let's face it, Alex has been shown to have a modus operandi where he demands answers, and like that had been shown in the Psi 10 Fundamentally Flawed podcast, and he showed it in he showed it last Saturday.
You got way more answers out of him by asking him questions nicely and just moving. You just learned more about the way he thinks by asking him questions rather than demanding answers. That's helpful, because
absolutely.
Now I see his. I started reading like I felt kind of like, am I still on the air?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I had a weird blank up there for a second. I didn't see anybody. Anyway, no, I thought I think you got more answers out of him because you were asking him, you know what I mean, than demanding answers. And I think in the end, now that I know more about where he's coming from, then I'm more educated on it, you know? Like, I didn't even know, I don't know much about this stuff, man. I really don't, you know?
Hmm.
Like, I'm a nature, man. I'm a scientist. I have a certain, I guess, way of thinking.
Expectation, right?
Well,
And the
and
funny thing is, not everybody is deep into it as we are. Not everybody is as nerdy about this specific topic as we all are.
I didn't realize how much there is to read. So,
Who's
like, I've
we?
been reading about a lot of stuff,
I'm
man.
talking to you, Alex.
Reading's good, though.
I have to say, Chris, you are a pretty clever guy, and you are pretty good at getting people to lower their guards and actually answer questions that atheists typically have Christians avoid. I mean, I think I kind of fall somewhere between yourself and Alex as far as approaching Christians, but
Yeah.
you kind of gave it to him a little bit there in the middle, and he didn't seem to really catch on to it. But
I mean, I wasn't expecting it to go there, to be honest. I mean, that little exchange we had in the middle, I was as surprised as anyone. And so when he didn't answer me, and I was like, "You're gonna give me more room to talk?" Like, I didn't know what to do, man.
I was a little bit bothered, and I think I've been a bit obvious about what I expected to see in a sense. But I was a bit bothered at the end with the kind of humility, the kind of admission that he was being a jerk a little bit. Like, but it was a kind of like, I'm the same. I did the same thing like Alex, except where Alex is responsible for it as himself. I'm responsible for it because I'm a fallen creation, and I'm like, oh, that's not an admission. That's not an apology either, or not an apology necessarily, but it didn't sound legit. You know, it didn't sound honest. It sounded like, well, I'm a fallen creature. I can, you know, of course I'm gonna make mistakes. I didn't get that real, you know, I done goofed in a sense about what I said. I wanted to see that. I as a viewer, when I'm seeing these two sides and I'm seeing, you know, the guys are having back and forths and you're having a little, you know, your drama. I think.
Yeah, you like expectation of drama. You want to see...
and to see people come back and have a little humility and say that, yeah, I did that. I said that. I was definitely taking the piss out of someone. I was definitely trying to get my goals there. I know it's wrong. I know it's, you know, maybe not the best approach or not the most polite thing to do, but I admit that. And myself, I mean, as somebody who would parody anything or anyone, and you know, obviously that I know that, you know, in some cases I'll make mistakes and I'll do something wrong, but I'll wholly admit that. And it kind of was sounding like he was getting there. It sounded like he was going to say, you know, I'm the same. I did the same thing like Alex. I'm no better or no worse than Alex in this whole situation, but it didn't come out with the same. It didn't come out with the impact that or the effect that I thought it would. So he lost points there.
I don't know. When you start a sentence with, "I'm not saying Alex is a bad guy, but."
It's never a good way to start a sentence. Well, what do you think, Dr. Shook?
Oh, am I live? Can y'all hear me? Hey, what's up? Good to see y'all again. Well, I was just curious about that way that I thought Chris did an excellent job making a distinction between internal and external justifications. It went right over his head, as far as I could tell. Is that what you guys were thinking at the same time? Just like
totally
zoom right over his head.
Yeah.
So kudos to Chris. I was very impressed with that. It was almost as if he had read my chapter on presuppositionalism from my God Debates book. I got to tease you on that one, dude. I'm here in this guy's apartment. It's an awesome apartment. And we're hanging out this weekend in Philadelphia, so we're gonna have a good time. Hope to see you guys on the Hangout. But that's about all I had to say on that. Kudos to Chris. I thought that was really clever. I think these presuppositionalists, will only accept as reasons what they've already decided to accept as reasons, and you really can't get past it.
Yeah.
I don't think he followed it at all. I think he
No,
just
he got lost. He was thinking about something else, man. And then howdy. But you know, man, that was cool though, man. You were like, well, through worldview, you brought it to that. I was like, oh man, sounds like something that happened earlier on the first and the other page that you had, Facebook.
Meeting of the minds.
No, before that.
The secular and creationism page.
Right, yeah, with the worldview thing. Because I got called out on all kinds of worldviews. People totally couldn't peg who I was or what I was thinking, which was a lot of fun for me. Because I never told anybody what my worldview was. Because I was like, what's that mean? I'm like, I just want to have a conversation. Like, I don't know, I'm not down with this whole lingo yet. I had to, like, learn it along the way.
I noticed, I think towards the end when those heavy questions or those really precept type questions came in, that I mean, a script can only serve you so far. It was almost Sci 10 in that sense. It was almost like the, well, you could be wrong about that kind of answer to everything. And I saw that, yeah, maybe, I don't know if he really understands his own material or if he's following the script. So I thought that really didn't work out.
Can somebody please give me like the best definition for presuppositional? I've been reading like on and off like now about this, even during that, like trying to learn more. Like somebody just give me like a really good, I'm trying to grasp the logic of it and I'm having a hard time.
I nominate FSX.
Oh, it's just a way to annoy and confuse atheists and get them to yell and scream and end a debate.
No.
I think that's best.
But no, I'm
agree.
dead serious. Like I really am.
That's
Like, I
honestly my
really
answer.
want, like if somebody give me like.
All right, Ozzy, lay it out.
It's basically presupposing that God exists and using that as a justification for all the claims you make.
Right,
In
but you
order
have
to
to have that assumption first, right? That's the absolute assumption that everything wraps around.
Right.
In order to know anything, yeah, in order
Circular
to know
argument.
anything.
It's not just about knowledge. There's a lot more to presuppositionalism than the knowledge argument. At the risk of sounding self-serving here, Joseph, there's a video on my channel where I did a hangout with someone, a fellow by the name of John F. McDropout and Alana Fireflower, where we talked at length about presuppositionalism and the logic of presuppositionalism. So if you're willing to watch like a 3-hour hangout where I sort of bloviate on the subject, you might find something interesting there. But the point of the presuppositional argument is that we all have worldviews. There's no way to evaluate worldviews objectively. That is, there's no neutral standpoint outside of all worldviews by which you could survey all of the worldviews and evaluate them. Any attempt to
Objective? Why? Because it can't be objective? Is that what it is?
No, it's not that you can't really be objective. It's that the criteria by which you would evaluate and compare and contrast and weigh the strengths and weaknesses of various worldviews would require a whole set of criteria about what constitutes a good argument, what constitutes evidence, what kinds of things can and can't exist. In other words, you'd be bringing your whole worldview into your evaluation when you compare worldviews, right? So the idea is you have to compare worldviews from within, internally. And then, so what they say is, okay, well, look, within my Christian worldview, I can explain and account for all kinds of very complex philosophical questions that are very important. And if it turns out that on your worldview, for instance, you can't explain and justify why you trust reason, why you can rely on induction, why you can assume regularities in nature, why you can trust the evidence of your senses, if you can't explain why you can rely on your memory, if you can't explain why there is a standard of right and wrong, if the conceptual resources of your worldview are not all there, are not sufficient to account for all of these phenomena, all of these ways that you live, and yet you live that way, then there's something wrong with your worldview. You're a kind of hypocrite. You're living under a kind of false consciousness because you live as if there's a right and wrong. You live as if you can trust logic. You live as if you can trust the evidence of your senses and the uniformity of nature. But there's nothing in your worldview that can explain why all of those things should be the case. But the Christian worldview, they argue, and only the Christian worldview, they go on to argue, can supply you with the conceptual resources for making sense of that. So the idea is that all other worldviews are intellectually inadequate and should feel intellectually dissatisfied. And if you want to be an intellectually satisfied person, you should become a Christian.
Okay, can I say something real quick?
Well done, Ozzy. Well done.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Ozzy actually almost makes. Oh, this is Ben. You guys probably know
hi,
me.
Ben.
My camera is really crappy, so I just left it off. But Ozzy actually makes that argument sound respectable, and he's making it the way that a sophisticated theologian would make the argument. But the way that most of the precepts are making the argument is really just a code word for faith. It's a fancy-sounding 7-syllable word that really just means faith, and you try to make faith sound respectable by backing it up with all this philosophical jargon. But really what they're doing is they're saying we have faith in the Bible, we have faith in God, and we're starting from there and moving forward from there. And that's it. I mean, it's faith turned into a philosophical argument from my perspective.
This is where I run into problems, like, when we have, like, debates and stuff on different pages, and I'm talking to where this is all like verbal and text and stuff, but we're talking about Ozzy was talking about worldviews, and you can only internalize something within a worldview. I guess what I'm trying to say is that hard evidence should be able to move between worldviews, because if you show it without text and objectively analyze a hard evidence, then people generally rise to the same conclusion if they have at least a basic understanding of what they're looking at. In science, that's how it is. I could literally, if I at least knew what the language was, or not even a graph, forget a graph because it has to be textual at some point, but if you show in a certain brain region, like certain neurons that are labeled with immuno or something like that, different colors, I will know that those neurons are supposed to be there based on previous evidence I've seen from other labs. So without any textual influence whatsoever, that hard data will tell me what that is.
But you're using your senses and reason.
They're going to say that you gained all of that knowledge through your senses, which are inherently circular, so that's invalid.
Yeah, exactly.
How can a sense be circular though when the argument, it doesn't have a central point? You know what I mean? It's like if it's hard evidence, then and you've told nobody that text, there's no verbal, no textual cues whatsoever, and it's just hard evidence, and people come to the same conclusion. That would, I guess, mean that it could go between worldviews, right? Because there's no actual language going on. It's real.
Yeah, it doesn't rest on language. The problem doesn't rest on.
I'm sorry, I'm going to the language thing because I had an argument with this guy about language, and because he said God made language because, and I was like, well, birds have the same genes that control the language acquisition and the language motor output regions. They're homologous with the mammalian system, and birds are phylogenetically older, so God gave birds language first, and then humans learned it from them. Well, actually, musical theory says that, like Maute, that certain notes, right? And don't certain notes were derived. Music was actually from nature, right? Like in the chickadee, like that, like it goes a whole octave. It actually shifts a whole octave. So, I mean, at least my music teacher was telling me about, and then the Greek, there were different tribes. He knows more about this than I do, but the Ionian, the Dorian, Mixolydian,
sure,
right?
the modes.
This is live, right?
The modes, but it was all based off of a certain note sequence, and birds have that note sequence too. And he was saying language then can only be innate by God. So anyway, my point is that when it's only words and it's only here, it can go anywhere. But if it's actually physical, then it should go between, and there's no hand-waving semantics. Because there wasn't any.
Well, you're being an evidentialist, though. That's the problem. Any evidence is irrelevant to a presupper. It's all circular. It's all based on your senses, and this whole circular argument with the presuppers has kind of been ignored. They used to use this virtuous versus a vicious circle, and no one's ever nailed them on the point that from the get-go, they admitted their argument was circular. They admitted it was flawed, and there should have been nothing else to say about it from that point on. But we let Sai go into this, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know you're breathing right now? And we wasted all this time when initially the argument was dead from the beginning. And now the argument is turned into we're not even going to argue the argument because we know that all the atheists have figured out the answer to our little word games. So there is no argument now. I think the pre-sup argument is pretty much dead.
I'm new to
It's
it.
dying gracefully.
I mean, they won't even argue it now.
Yeah. The whole you have to have a well, it's funny because it actually falls into the same terminology. You have to presume of certain variables to already be there. They're presumably there, which
like you're saying axioms.
Right. Well, everything is so. What started the Big Bang? Like, because he talked about that tonight, right? Like, I mean, to him it was like, well, what started the Big? God, I don't have to say that the presuppositional argument, even or the what's the not the presumption? Jesus, what's the Maute? Help me out. The
Cosmological
existence, the primacy of existence.
There.
I don't need to answer that. He says, really, because. Like the Big Bang and everything, everybody knows God started that. Like, because by his worldview, he's so already like, well, of course God started the Big Bang. What, do you think of something different? Like, it seemed almost like he was confused at one point that you weren't, like, grabbing onto it. Because you were like, yeah, at one point you were. You were like, that's not how I think. And I think that's actually when you shifted into the internal and external thing, I thought. I thought that was when you actually made that transition.
I mean, if he's rejecting the primacy of existence, he's essentially saying that it's possible God doesn't exist.
But it's weird, though, because he doesn't reject it. He doesn't answer the question. He always says, well, wait, before we get into that, let me talk about my conversation with Alex and shift. It's a lawyer tactic. You know what I mean? You shift people off, and then you're like, what was the question?
How did Maute handled something really, really well, I found. He said something about certainty. You said, I don't really go with certainty. I think it's a sliding scale. Let's move on. Just frankly said that and moved on. Answered the question, was very, very, and just kind of, we'll keep the conversation going. I thought that was handled very well because you don't want to get, I think they tend to avoid or dodge questions, and by they I mean presuppositionalists will tend to dodge questions, and even people answering them as well. I've heard a couple of podcasts where a lot of questions were dodged as well, or unanswered, or was difficult to answer. I just love the way Maute handled
the purpose of the conversation was not for me to argue with them.
No, I know.
No, yeah, of course.
Said that too. Said that.
Okay.
And Joseph, I'm loving how this philosophical discussion is being hit by the scientist coming in. I just think you have a very refreshing, interesting approach, not reproach. What?
Yeah, man,
Really cool,
I
man.
had a hard time when Maute and I first started talking about this stuff. Before I even joined the group, we were talking quite a bit. Remember, like you were saying at ACAMS, you're just talking and talking and talking. I was like, God, I gotta hear some different perspectives because I've been locked in the lab with no windows and everything, and hearing people talk about the same crap for.
It's not my. It goes way over my hair. The
Hello?
philosophical
man,
thing,
you know
not
what?
happening.
It's a language, though.
Hello, you can hear me.
It is a language. It's a language. Just like I don't get the.
I got nothing.
Hold on a
I
second.
can see you. I can see your lips moving, but I'm not getting.
Everybody else
I'm
hear
not
me?
getting it. I'm hearing my computer sounds, and
Hold on, Joseph.
my alerts and stuff, but not your voices. So sorry, guys.
That's okay. We can
Go continue.
I'm going to mute you right now. You can hear me. So what?
Yeah, the same thing happened to me. It went away after about a minute.
We'll put on subtitles. Hold on. Where's the... No? Nothing? There? Yeah, I tried.
That was awesome.
Christopher, I don't think we can hear Christopher right now. He's muted.
He's muted.
I am muted.
I think
I
we
was
were,
I was screaming at him for no reason. I was like, "I'm gonna mute you," for no reason.
How do you do
Dude.
that?
The funny
But-
thing is, I know Greg from way back.
Oh, there it is.
I'm interested in the end goal between these debates, these discussions, and I'm very interested to hear about
Good
from FSX23 what and I forgot your name already. I've heard it.
Fareed.
Fareed, that's right. Sorry about that. I'd like to hear what are we meant to accomplish exactly, and we're saying, okay, well, this is our position, this is why you're wrong, but ultimately to what end? Is it
That's a good
to
question.
win? The idea is it looks like it's a a pissing contest sometimes, and what does that accomplish? I don't have an answer to that. It's just kind of an open question, and I'd like to hear what people think.
To be honest, most of it is just for fun. I mean, I'm never gonna. I guess I watched these when I first heard about this pre-sup argument. I was confused by it. It's a big word game, and it took
I'm
me a
still
while
fucking
to.
confused. Sorry.
Yeah, and once you kind of figure it out, it's not as clever as it seems. I mean, it was off the bat because it just there's something about it. It just seemed natural, but I mean, I think people like Cy and people like Tim are generally bullies with atheists, and I think it's kind of nice to knock them down a peg every now and then and show that they aren't these geniuses they seem to think they are. And I don't know.
I think there's
kinda
more
just
to it than that.
It's
I think there's
honestly
more to
a
it.
spinoff of. I used to watch a lot of Kent Hovind stuff back in the day. And then Kent Hovind went to jail. I ran out of Kent Hovind stuff to watch on YouTube. And then Eric
There's
Hovind came out.
tons.
And then
There's-
Eric Hovind started with this pre-sup thing with Thunderfoot. And then all of a sudden this guy named Cy came out. And this seems to be where this online YouTube Christian movement is going, this pre-sup argument. And
We followed the exact same path.
Have you
Wow.
guys ever have to read Descartes and stuff when you were?
I
when
mean,
you were-
I'd frankly rather be arguing about evolution or science or what they used to argue about, not this nonsense about me worrying about my existence and how do I know what I know and how do I
that's
know
why I'm
that.
asking about Descartes, because it reminds me of like when I took a class. God, I think it was like when I first started college, and I moved up north, and I took it. It was an awesome professor, and he started. It's a Christian university, Catholic university actually, and he starts right off, and he's a philosophy professor, and he's like, God doesn't exist, go, and it was just like, boom, like the class just like, and I just sat back and listened, and then he gave us really good literature. We read, Descartes. By the way, he wasn't Christian or didn't even impose any Christian thoughts on anybody at any point. It was just that it was at a Catholic university. That's all. But
that's college in Canada. I mean, it's just like God
It
doesn't
was
exist
awesome,
already.
because then I
Move on.
learned. That's where I learned where a lot of these things are kind of loosely based off of. Where it's okay, I think, therefore I am. That was the trying to get Alex. Oh well, if you can't be accountable for your own thoughts, then you don't even exist. That's a Descartesian thing. And then the third meditation, I had to reread it recently. This inspired me, Maute, to reread Descartes.
Good. Next time I wanted to inspire you to eat babies like a good atheist.
No, but that's where Descartes says, the fact that I can conceive the notion that a God exists must mean that there is one. And that, I remember being in the class, and like I'd been in Catholicism my whole life, and I remember being in class and being like, that's a bullshit argument. Sorry. Like I was like, you can't just say that because something you thought of something that then means. You mean like the first part, I think therefore I am, is absolutely true. You can't exist, you can't think and not exist. You have to. But that next part, man, it was just like, wait a minute. Now all of a sudden your thoughts are just awesome, but that you think that God exists and then he does. Like there was nothing to it, because he didn't have to prove the first part to anybody, any evidence. It's the second part where then now he needs to prove.
Yes,
that he's
Joe.
outside of
My thoughts are awesome.
Yeah, I thought that idea was defeated by Peter Pan. You can't just believe you can fly. I mean, I tried this
But I'm trying
several
to say,
thousand times as a kid.
Forget Hume.
No, but I guess
Peter Pan took care of that.
Peter Pan.
this is what that presuppositional argument thing sounds like to me. It sounds like, well, wait a minute, I can conceive. He said it tonight. He said something like, because I can conceive God to exist, he must exist. And I was
That's
like,
not the argument. That's not the argument. That's a mischaracterization. And anybody who thinks that's what he's saying is to be forgiven because he articulated it very badly. But that's not the position. He's part of the Reformed.
I heard it that way.
He's part of the Reformed Christian sort of Calvinistic tradition, I mean, and it's not just Reformed Christians who believe this, but a lot of Christians believe that God has implanted in all of us something called a sensus divinitatis, a sense of the divine, a sense of God. And there's lots of ways that we know God. We know God, for instance, well, we have a conscience, we have an innate sense of morality and right and wrong. We're made in the image of God, and that automatically gives us some intuition. What's that?
Rats have it too. Rodents have it too, actually.
Well, no, but look. I'm not trying to persuade you. I'm trying to get you to understand what their argument is. Like, you can't get as far as understanding their point of view if you're.
I'm not as good as Maute. I had to say it. Sorry.
No. But you can't get as far as refuting presuppositionalism and these apologetical styles unless you can at least understand what they're saying, right? And if you sort of try to refute it prematurely, you never get to hear the argument. Right, so they're not doing sort of defining God into existence. That's not the argument. They're not saying I can conceive of God, therefore He exists. And that, by the way, is not what Descartes does in the Cartesian Meditations. The argument is a version of the ontological argument. He has this theory of representative realities in that meditation that you're talking about. So there's a lot more going on there. I don't think it's a good argument, but it's not just sort of I imagine God, therefore He must exist. There's quite a bit more to that argument. But certainly Bible Thumping Wingnut wasn't going there because I'm confident he doesn't know that argument. In fact, I'm confident he doesn't understand presuppositionalism very well. I was confident of that before I saw this, and I know for a fact now that he doesn't know presuppositionalism very well. He doesn't understand the argument, and I'm of the opinion that Cy doesn't understand the argument.
Why don't you debate him, man?
Well, I don't do debates, but I've invited him to a conversation. Moments after he finished his exchange with Alex Botten, I wrote him an email, a private message via YouTube, and I said, hey, listen, this is something I know a little bit about. It's an argument that I can actually entertain and take seriously. I think you've been very ill-served by Cy ten Bruggenkate's sort of lunk-headed, dumbed-down version of presuppositionalism. There are more sophisticated versions of this that you could familiarize yourself with, and if you're interested in having a conversation with this, not a public debate, not a challenge, just two guys talking, I'd be happy to talk to you about it, because I think he's a sincere fellow. That is, he's a sincere Christian. He believes what he believes.
No, yeah.
And he would like, I'm sure, to hear sort of a better upscaled version of this. What he's been taught is a set of techniques for stumping people who haven't thought about certain questions. And unless you're a philosopher and have devoted considerable time and thought and reading to these topics, and someone says, what's your standard of truth? What do you mean by truth? What's your theory of knowledge? What's your epistemological standard? What's your justification for this and that? Nobody's going to have these answers in their back pocket. I mean, I've got answers in my back pocket, but I mean, I devoted a chunk of my life to it. So, he can't stump me with those kinds of questions, but he can stump almost everybody because these are terms of art. These are specialties. Of course, you don't need to know these things to be an intelligent, reasonable person. But you can stump people and you can dominate them and you can humiliate them and make them feel stupid. And then because you have made the person feel small, you can then boast, and I think it's an empty boast, that you have accounts of all of these things. And I think that the accounts the presuppositionalists, when they get around to providing them, are completely vacuous. They're really quite empty. But people like Cy ten Bruggenkate never get as far as articulating the positive accounts of these things because they're just interested in sort of shutting people up. And this was demonstrated tonight, actually, when Bible Thumping Wingnut really couldn't articulate his argument. I mean, Chris Maute did something really sort of revealing when he said, when he was asking him about the whole primacy of existence business. What I thought what was most interesting about that is that no presuppositionalist should be stumped by that, because the presuppositionalist argument is not you can't know anything. It's the presuppositionalist position is actually we all know things, and the reason we all know things is because there's a God, and I mean there's a big story to be told there. I don't want to repeat that here, but that we all know things. We're all in the same epistemological boat. We're not. It's not that. It's not.
Unconscious? Sorry, is this like the collective unconscious?
No, nothing like that. No. We know things the way we just know things. You see things, you remember things, you do science.
It's collective unconscious, though, isn't it? In a way, I mean, it's like you.
No. It's no. Trust me. Like you're barking up the wrong tree. It's nothing like that. And I'm familiar with sort of the Jungian theories of the collective unconscious and stuff like that. It's nothing like that.
I'm using it kind of liberally, though. Like, I'm not being so,
Okay. No, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like a collective unconscious. I mean, they believe that there's shared universal knowledge that's pickled into us by God, but the presuppositionalist position is not that Christians can know things and you can't, and therefore it's up to you to prove to me that you can know something with certainty. That's not their position. This is what Psi and his Psi clones have come to think is presuppositionalism, but it's not. The presuppositionalist position is we can all know things, and the way we know things is because there is a God, and they have a whole story about how God can constitute a foundation for knowledge. We can all have knowledge. We can trust our senses. We can use induction. We can rely on uniformities of nature. We can do science and all that wonderful stuff, and so we all know what we know the same way. There's no difference.
I can make the same argument though for aliens and say that we know, everything that we know. I'm not arguing with you because I know you don't. This isn't your position.
Of course.
But I can make the argument that everything that we know, mathematics and logic and language and everything, is because of the Anunnaki, that came down and gave the people 6,000 years ago, the Sumerians, mathematics and language, and then everything is built off of that. You know what I'm saying?
No, but that's not what the presuppositionalist is argument.
Atheism, so.
That's not the presuppositionalist argument. The presuppositionalist argument is precisely not what you just described. They do not argue that God puts specific knowledge into you about the world, right? Let me explain it sort of in brief with the knowledge question. Okay, the idea is this: there's a God, and he has a certain nature, and he is logical, and he created a world, and the world therefore reflects his nature and is logical. There's problems with all of that. I can object to that at various points. Okay, they believe that the world that he created is uniform and characterized by regularities and laws of nature. Okay, and he created us, and we are engineered creatures. We are artifacts designed to be in this world, and consequently he built us with cognitive capacities, memories, perception, inferential practices such as induction and deduction that allow us to have mental experiences that systematically co-vary with changing states in that world that God created. Our knowledge capacities, therefore, are imperfect but generally reliable, and so we can rely on what comes into us through our senses. We can do science, we can trust induction, we can trust logic. It's not that God put knowledge in our heads. It's not like aliens came and zapped math into our head. That's not the claim. The claim is God created us a certain way with certain capacities. Those capacities afford us abilities to understand the world around us. It is not a coincidence that we can understand the world. We were built to be able to understand the world. We were built for the world. And the world built with us in mind, and so that's part of the story. But it's not that God zapped particular knowledge into us. Okay, what they do think was zapped into us is a knowledge of God.
If you're born with it, and from what I remember, right, like in Catholicism, they say conception. That's when the Holy Spirit, enters, right? Right. So that means that it's at birth that this knowledge is as you say, zapped in, which is genetic. And my thing is that I don't agree with this. I'm just being a devil's advocate. But if aliens engineered DNA, then we would also be born with this knowledge. You know what I mean? From birth, just like as if one God, did it. My problem with the presumptual thing is that there's so many
presuppositional. You're being presumptual right now, brother.
Hey, Ozzy, could I just ask one thing? I'm just wondering, like, what he's asking and what I'm curious about is what's to stop someone from just presupposing anything you like and then acting like it's just as respectable as what they're presupposing.
Right. There's some breaks on that. Yeah.
So I mean, like what I call it the dueling presuppositions, or else the parody argument. I mean, like Greg Bray on I've seen him use this parody where he says like the Lord of Light, Lucifer, and he'll make all the same points they're making, but he'll attribute everything to Lucifer. And so like what's to stop someone from making that argument?
Okay. He's a false idol.
Okay. Well, there's a few things. All right. It's an excellent objection, by the way, because as soon as you just say, I'm going to presuppose something, then, well, what's the limit? What's to prevent you from presupposing any damn thing and arriving at any conclusion you want? You can reverse engineer your way to any dogma that you want by starting with the right presuppositions, right? So that's an excellent objection. What they're trying to do is this. They're saying, look, there are in fact features of reality, of our world and the way we live that need explaining. Why do people believe in right and wrong? Everyone seems to believe in right and wrong. Even people who describe themselves as moral relativists seem to behave exactly as if that certain things that offend them morally are really wrong. Why do you trust logic? How does logic work? Why do you trust induction? Right? Why do you all these things that we've already discussed? Okay. Now these are, if you want to have an intellectually satisfying worldview and not sort of be suffering under cognitive dissonance, it's got to be the case that you can account for these things. So you can't invent any old thing. You have to invent presuppositions that account for things which, if they were true, would explain and make sense of what you in fact already believe. The point is this. You believe certain things, but you're not entitled, rationally speaking, to believe those things, is their objection. Their objection to us is you can only believe these things in bad faith. You don't get to call yourself, you atheists, you don't get to call yourselves rational if you believe these things, but you can't justify them, if you can't make rational sense of them, if there are absent from your worldview conceptual resources necessary to explain these things. If those things are missing, you're just BSing when you say you're a rational person who takes things on evidence. The whole idea of evidence doesn't make sense on your worldview. So what they want to do is they want to say, well, we're going to two presuppositions. Here are your presuppositions, atheists. You believe in logic. You believe in right and wrong. You believe in induction. You believe in deduction. You believe in senses that you just memory, mind-independent.
Is Ozzy's audio only getting fuzzy on, or not fuzzy, but chalky on mine, or is it everybody?
Yeah,
Sorry,
Ozzy's
there are other
breaking
beings out there, and that they have a Christian God. Oh, okay. Okay. Let me know when you can hear me.
I
can hear.
presuppose that it's aliens
Can you hear
messing
me?
with his stream.
Obviously.
Okay, am I back?
I can hear you well now, yeah.
It's like it kind of comes in and out of waves.
Okay, thank you. Hang on, I didn't quite get the punchline out here, so let me see if I can do this now. So what they're trying to say is, look, you have all those presuppositions, okay, and that's what you need to get your worldview off the ground, okay? But I, as a Christian, only need two presuppositions. I need to presuppose that the Christian God exists, and that he wrote a book, and that it's inerrant, and I can trust the scriptures. With that, I can get the rest. Everything else you believe, I can get with just two presuppositions. You need all those other presuppositions. I can derive those presuppositions. You can't. You just have to baldly assert them and assume them. But I can derive those presuppositions. So their view, as they see it, is more parsimonious. They're applying Occam's razor.
Right.
If that argument's right, it's a good argument.
No, yeah, it is the simplest. Just is the hardest to prove. It's the simplest explanation, hardest to prove, really.
Well, right. But they'd say how. But notice, they would say, well, wait a minute, though. Your worldview and my worldviews are equivalent with respect to the things that we presuppose. It's just that I can rationalize and make sense of the presuppositions that you have, and you can't.
Right.
So yeah, there, right?
Yeah.
That's a good argument. I mean, if that's true, right? If they can actually derive what they say they can derive, that we all assume, using only two presuppositions, boy, that kicks our butt if that's true. I don't think that's true, and there's a lot of objections that I could bring to bear to this, and philosophers have done it, which is why philosophers, in the main, do not take presuppositionalism seriously. I mean, they're not up at night wondering, oh, how are we going to deal with this, right?
Well, no, because it is a total circular argument, because it always goes back to the beginning. Have you ever seen the God Wheel? That one's really
Yeah. No, but they don't have an objection. That's not an objection to them. They're not saying they can prove their presuppositions. What they're saying is that their presuppositions
it's so perfect, though. It's so perfect.
No, but you're not.
I don't have to.
No. Wait, Joseph, Joseph, you're not appreciating the point of the argument. The argument is not that they can prove their presuppositions. The argument is we all have presuppositions. Your presuppositions can't be supported. My presuppositions can't be supported. But all of your presuppositions I can derive. And you got more of them than I do, but I can derive, I can make sense of your presuppositions. You can't make sense of your presuppositions. They'll just say,
prove it.
Right? You can't prove your presuppositions either. You can't prove that logic is valid, right? So that's you can't fault them for being frank and admitting that we have presuppositions, right? So the strength of the argument is, look, we have to evaluate worldviews from the inside, and now, whose worldview is internally coherent and whose worldview is incoherent and unsupportable and leads to living a life that is at odds with what you say you believe. They'll say that we atheists and every other religion suffers that, but that Christianity does not. Now, I don't think that the case that they build for that they actually have a coherent worldview actually works. I think it folds. Under examination, but because we're all too busy trying to make up proofs of what we can know with certainty when we don't need to bother.
Well, what about the Bible, though? I mean, I don't think for one thing that you're presupposing one thing when you presuppose an infallible Bible, but beyond that, I mean, it's 66 books and all these different authors and compiled over centuries, but beyond that, what about when the Bible, the claims it makes, conflicts with observable reality? I mean, we can prove some of their presuppositions to be wrong. So I mean,
you can't get as far as. Oh, sorry, one of us is breaking up there.
I can hear you both pretty clear right now.
Okay. The idea that that you can trust the scriptures and just read the scriptures and trust them, that's not one presupposition. There's so much involved. I mean, look, before there could be scriptures that you could read, you already have to assume that there's a mind-independent reality, that there's a book out there. Okay, so you're already assuming more than just God and Scripture. You also have to assume that you can read. Well, that assumes that you've got a mind. Well, that assumes that you can have memories and you can actually read the sentence and get to the end of the sentence and remember the first sentence, which means you have to assume that you can rely on your memory. You have to assume that you can trust your senses, that your senses are not deceiving you as you're reading this book. In other words, in that one premise, that one presupposition that they're saying is one presupposition, they have smuggled in everything else that they're accusing us of believing on insufficient evidence. So that's one of the objections that I would raise to them is no, you don't have as few presuppositions as you think you do, buddy. You are just smuggling in presuppositions and not acknowledging them. You can't read Scripture and you can't read anything. You can't even look at anything unless you and believe that what you're seeing, unless you trust the evidence of your senses, unless you have a memory, unless you believe in semantic constancy, a mind-independent reality, and on and on and on.
Listen, before we go any further, I would like to make an observation that we have gone from talking about the talk that we had earlier today to talking specifics about presuppositionalism, and I think that this is a pretty good point to end this particular post-show hangout. Because if we wanted to talk specifically about presuppositionalism, there are awesome videos that Ozzy already has that could be pointed to that talk specifically about the presuppositional argument, as well as videos that he's done on the place, as well as videos that are all over the internet. To talk specifically about this. And we can also talk about this in future Hangouts. Also, being a host to John Shook, I feel responsible to get him home safely. And it is 11:20 here on the East Coast. So that being said, I'm going to end this Hangout. And I would like to thank everybody for spending their time hanging with us.
Thanks,
So,
Christopher.
Thanks,
no
Chris.
doubt.
It was a great show.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Ozzy.
No, you're
By the
welcome.
way, that was very informative.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad that helped.
All right, I will see everybody soon.
All right, adios.
Broadcast out.